Welcome back, welcome back. The South African President, Thabo Mbeki, has been widely criticised for his apparent inaction in his role as chief mediator in Zimbabwe, where the presidential election runoff is 2 weeks away. Challenger Morgan Tsvangirai was detained for the third time this week by the security forces of Robert Mugabe. Meanwhile, Zimbabweans face more misery with spiralling inflation and desperate food shortages under the Mugabe regime. I spoke to South Africa's Archbishop Tutu, one of the world's most respected statesmen, churchmen and leaders, about Zimbabwe today.
I'm very, very worried. I don't think if present conditions continue, I don't think that we are likely to have a free and fair election under those conditions. I think, that the international community ought really long ago to have sent a peacekeeping force to ensure that the people were not being intimidated and violated, and also that there ought to be a large team of international observers.
Both of those are needed, and then the UN force would be there to partially to protect the.
Yes,
they say 50 or 60 people may have been killed by ZANU-PF Mugabe supporters.
Yes, it's awful, and there's no doubt at all that most of the military establishment and the police clearly have been supportive of Mr. Mugabe, and he's used them quite effectively to intimidate. And I think that the world really does have to step in and say enough of this.
And who is it who should lead this reaction of the world in Zimbabwe? Is it President Thabo Mbeki, or is it the UN, or is it who should move in?
Yes, I would have thought that you have regional organizations such as the African Union, you have SADC, that they should clearly use their muscle. South Africa seems to have a pivotal role that they could play, and one can accept that there was something to be said for trying out quiet diplomacy. But when it became clear that this was not delivering the goods, I think we should have changed tack and shown quite clearly that we were not tolerating what was happening. Unfortunately, our president has been very, very reluctant to appear, I suppose, like a bully boy.
So now, Mr. Tsvangirai wants a new mediator. Who could be the new mediator?
When you're a mediator, on the whole, you mediate because you are found acceptable by both sides. And if one side has said they have very little or no confidence in your mediatorial role, then I think they probably ought to be looking out for somebody. And since Kofi Annan did such a splendid job of work in Kenya, he has the right kind of credentials. He has shown that he has a very real commitment in spending as much time as he did in Kenya. I would nominate him as someone I'm sure would find acceptance almost universally in the continent.
So he would be your nomination.
If it was that we were looking to go the route of mediation, we've still got this election runoff where presumably you don't need a mediator. You want the people to decide one way or the other. But because it seems highly unlikely that we will have free and fair elections. It just might mean, some people are speaking about a government of national unity. Mr. Tsvangirai has initially kicked against that particular idea, but it may be that it is something that has to be considered very seriously if it does help to stop the awful, awful condition under which the people are living at the moment.
And do you think the time has come for Robert Mugabe to step down? That's not in character for him, but should he step down?
Well, we suggested that long ago, I mean, and said that he still had the possibility of stepping down with some dignity and perhaps salvaging something of his legacy. We've still got to try to persuade him that, look here, and I suggested, I mean, that they dangle the carrot of a soft landing, say to him, look, you won't have to face charges. Now, I know that many might say you are encouraging impunity, but, you know, politics is the art of the possible. And you're saying if perhaps you were able to get him to step down, then you really do mean that you have saved a lot of people a great deal of suffering.
A great deal of suffering saved, if only he would step down.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think that if he doesn't step down and he runs in the election, as he seems to do, does Mr. Tsvangirai, with all of the pressures that have been put on his supporters, does he still have a chance of winning?
Well, it's the chance of a snowball in hell. Yeah. I think. I mean, it will be one of the most improbable things. Well, and strange things have happened in the world, but I don't myself think that we are likely to see a fair result emerge from elections held under those conditions.
And meanwhile, in South Africa, you've had violence on Zimbabweans who come into the country. That's rather sad, isn't it?
I want to apologize to the extent that I might be representative of many of my compatriots. Apologize to Zimbabweans and to all of those other foreigners who have borne the brunt of this ghastly attack. There's no way in which you could excuse it, and I would want to apologize and hope, I mean, that the foreigners in our country will have noted just how many other people have protested against what has happened and sought to provide aid in the way that they have done. I mean, it doesn't make up for it. It doesn't make up for the awful, awful xenophobic attacks, but it does show that it isn't the whole nation, as it were, turned against foreigners.
Thank you again for being with us, Archbishop Tutu. It's always a joy to have you with us, and a privilege, I may say, Desmond.
Well, I always keep remembering that was the week that was
well,
in the
1960s.
Nice?
Well, I'm delighted you remember that.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice that the Archbishop remembers that? We'll take a break and we'll be right back.